40 years ago, a comet collision caused a catastrophe. Most of the continents were submerged, and the Korean peninsula turned into a desert. Only 1% of the world's population survived, giving rise to a new order. The polluted air everywhere led to the invention of air core, which converts oxyanium into oxygen, and humans must wear oxygen masks before stepping out. Due to the scarcity of resources, the population was divided into general, special, and core. They live in separate districts and are distinguished by QR codes on their wrists. There is another category of people, the refugees, who weren't chosen to be among any of the three districts. They don't have QR codes and don't get access to food, oxygen, and any other basic rights. Some of them become hunters, who steal these necessities through violent means. It's the elite deliverymen known as Black Knights who protect the supplies from hunters and deliver them on time to the people in the three districts. Becoming a deliveryman is the only hope for refugees to become a part of the above three districts and live a decent life. The best knight in the business is 5 to 8, who is the best at his job and quite popular. He leads a secret group of deliverymen who used to be refugees, and they help refugees in whatever way they can. Because of this, 5 to 8 is a beacon of hope for the refugees. Hunters have tried to rob him many times, but his fighting skills can't be topped. Refugees and hunters also often get into fights, using food and oxygen as currency for their bets. Today, a boy named Saul is fighting hunters while his best friends watch him from a safe spot. The hunters attack Saul as a group, but he's so strong that he has no trouble fighting them all at the same time, using whatever object he can find around him to help and obtaining a clean victory. Meanwhile, 5 to 8 is on his way back from work when he notices some hunters about to kill a newbie knight after robbing him. He tries to use diplomacy, but since the hunters respond by aiming their weapons at him, 5 to 8 immediately fights them hand to hand. He uses precise strikes to knock them all out, including the hunter that tries to come after him with a bike. Thankfully, the newbie is rescued with no wounds. In the evening, Saul sneaks into an apartment where Major Jong of the Defense Intelligence Command catches him and begins fighting him. After exchanging a few hits, Jong takes the victory, and it's revealed Saul actually lives there with the Major and her sister Sola. They've been together for 10 years, and the girls consider him family, even though it is illegal to harbor refugees. The previous attack had been a punishment because they don't like it when Saul fights for supplies, and Saul explains that for him those fights count as training because he wants to become a knight. However, Jong reminds him that his dreams are in vain and grounds him. The next day, an important meeting is happening at the building of the nghiem group. When the world turned upside down 40 years ago, Chairman Ryu and his company were the ones that built this new system. Now they're constructing District A, which will allow the government to relocate the people of the special district that lies underground. While Chairman Ryu wants the government to handle the relocation, his son and CEO Suk doesn't agree because the government will also relocate the refugees, who he hates and considers vermin. In the afternoon, Saul sneaks out of the apartment to hang out with his friends. They hide near the road, and when a night truck passes by, they run after it and climb on its roof just for fun. It turns out the rider is 5 to 8, and when he sees the kids in his mirror, he begins driving like crazy to make them fall. Since they still hold on, 5 to 8 activates the electrical system, and all the boys fall except for Saul, who jumps through the window into the passenger seat. Saul asks for a fight, but 5 to 8 just pushes him out of the truck. Moments later, 5 to 8 goes through an awful sandstorm to arrive at a spot he was invited to by a mysterious text message. 5 to 8 watches how a new air corps is brought to District A, which is sooner than expected. Jong is in charge of the convoy, and she also finds it suspicious that nobody is allowed to see the construction process. On her way back, she sees 5 to 8 nearby, but he avoids being arrested by saying the sandstorm derailed his truck. When Saul returns home, Sola locks him in his room to start his grounded time. 5 to 8 comes by to drop off the family's supplies, but after he leaves, Sola is shocked to see more men coming to the apartment. They push her against the wall and try to inject her with something, causing her to scream. Saul hears this and begins kicking his door until he breaks it, then he proceeds to beat all the men up. A few shots are exchanged, and when he checks on Salah, it's too late. A stray bullet killed her. Being in shock, Saul doesn't hear a man come closer and shoot him too. 5 to 8 is still nearby and hears gunshots, so he rushes up to help. After killing the last guy, he's surprised to find still Saul alive and immediately takes him to his place for medical treatment. In the middle of it, Saul wakes up and tries to escape, not listening to 5 to 8 when he says he's safe, so they put him to sleep with an injection. After the doctors leave, 5 to 8 notices a wound on Saul's foot and sees his skeleton is made of metal, meaning the rumors about mutants may be true. A metal skull would explain why the bullet didn't kill him. Meanwhile, Jong is called to recognize her sister, and she asks her team to do a thorough investigation before taking the body to be cremated. Afterward, Jong goes to see Saul's friends and the old man they call Grandpa to tell them what happened. In the evening, 5 to 8 goes to see Jong to tell her he saved Saul. They share the clues they have and come to the conclusion this matches the recent attacks the neighborhood has been suffering from, except this time there was a murder instead of a kidnapping. After 5 to 8 leaves, Jong remembers when a few years ago, she and other soldiers were sent to kill a bunch of refugees that were rioting. Jong hated killing innocents, and when she saw a boy hidden by the debris, she let him live. She came back to help him later, and now in the present she realizes that it had been 5 to 8. When Jong goes home, she's surprised to find a recovered Saul. After they bond over their grief, Jong tells him that since Salah isn't around anymore, Saul can go live with his 3 friends and Grandpa, and Saul thanks her for everything. However, a depressed Saul goes to look for a group of hunters and asks them to beat him up because he feels guilty about Salah's death. The hunters gladly begin hitting him without mercy, but at that moment Saul's friends show up to save him. They're weak and the hunters don't fear them, so they hit Saul on the head, knocking him out. Then the trio takes Saul home, believing him to be comatose because days pass and he still sleeps. Meanwhile, Night 5 to 7 visits Suk and asks about the kids he's been kidnapping for him, because there are rumors that they're being used for experiments. He doesn't want to do it if that's the case. Suk assures him that everything is being done to save more people and that if 5 to 7 does one more job for him, he can live in the richer district. After 5 to 7 leaves accepting to work, Suk goes to take his blood treatment, since apparently he's pretty ill. Later in the evening, 5 to 8 and his night buddies follow clues left by the kidnappers until they find a suspicious building. They break into the place, and after killing all the guards, they find a bunch of kidnapped kids, confirming they're being used for experiments. Meanwhile, Saul finally wakes up and Grandpa offers some words of comfort to help him get through his grief. The next day, 5 to 8 visits Grandpa and asks him if he knew Saul is a mutant. Grandpa didn't know this, but he explains Saul's father worked in an oxyanium mine, where there was enough radioactive material. The theory is that all the children with minor parents became mutants. In the meantime, Jong is frustrated because her team was taken off the case since she was too close to the victim. However, she still looks at the information in private and realizes 5 to 7 had originally been the one that had to deliver to her house, not 5 to 8. When 5 to 8 returns to the night headquarters after work, he finds 5 to 7 trying to end things for himself because he felt guilty for his crimes. 5 to 8 rescues him and asks questions, but 5 to 7 only confirms he did the kidnappings before he suddenly dies. It turns out he missed his mission tonight and Jong has killed him remotely through a device inside his head. Now 5-7's spot is open. Suk decides to organize a special event to choose his replacement. The next morning, 5 to 8 watches his co-workers train and learns that the official report says 5 to 7 died from overworking. 5 to 8 is asked to train too, but he knocks out his opponent with just one hit. Soon lots of flyers are spread around town promoting an incoming tournament, and the winner will get to be the next night. When Saul hears about this, he goes to stand in the middle of the road to wait for 5 to 8. The determination in his eyes reminds 5 to 8 of the day he survived another refugee massacre by pretending to be dead on a pile of bodies, so 5 to 8 sees himself on Saul. When the kid asks him to train him for the tournament, 5 to 8 says Saul needs to prove himself worthy. In the evening, Zhang's team informs her they've discovered 5 to 8 and some other knights meet in secret. In fact, one of these meetings is happening right now, with 5 to 8 telling the others about the experiments and the fact he thinks mutants are being targeted. 5 to 8 thinks they can use Saul to find the person behind all this, besides the fact he wants to help him for real too. At that moment, Zhang and her team arrive, so 5 to 8 accepts to have a private talk with her and tells her what he knows except the fact Saul is a mutant. The next day, Saul shows up at 5-8's meeting place for training. The kid may be strong, but 5 to 8 has more experience, so he still easily beats him up, confirming he needs to teach him real techniques. Sometime later, Saul and a bunch of other people show up for the preliminary tests before the tournament. A computer scans their body, and if someone is too weak, they aren't allowed to participate. Saul's friends don't pass, but he does. In the evening, he goes back to training, and 5 to 8 shoots baseballs at him to teach him to dodge, because Saul is used to taking hits with his hard head. When Saul fails, another knight comes forward and stops all the balls with fists and kicks, impressing Saul. Sometime later, Saul goes to the tournament to fight in the first round. All the volunteers have been separated into smaller groups, and now they have to fight until there's only one standing. The winners will pass to the next round. The oxygen levels will also go down every few minutes. Remembering all the harsh training he's been going through, Saul can easily defend himself and beat up other participants. His skills are so good that some men team up to attack him together, and while they do land some hits, Saul still wins. Suddenly the oxygen is about to run out and a boy jumps on Saul to hit him brutally, but Saul uses a quick move to overpower him and beat him up, effectively being the last one standing in the end. In total, 8 people will go to the second round. In the evening, Zhang gets in contact with some miners to ask for information about the kidnapped kids. Sometime later, 5 to 8 snipes the driver of a truck to rescue a vehicle filled with refugees that were about to get executed. 5 to 8 isn't surprised to hear they were all minors. Meanwhile, Suk wants the data of all the residents that are getting relocated, but Ryu denies it, knowing Suk thinks they should choose instead of being equal to everyone. Sometime later, Suk calls Zhang and asks her for the information instead, reminding her it's her duty to cooperate. Later, Saul proves to 5 to 8 that he can drive before he assists the event for the second round. The test consists of delivering a package safely across the finish line. Along the road, there'll be hunters with criminal records that will attack them, and if they get the package, they'll be released from prison. Weapons are provided to defend the package, and they are allowed to kill the hunters. Only the first 2 people to make it to the finish line will pass to the third round, and the current knights will watch to make sure the competition is fair. The race soon begins, and the participants find themselves surrounded by hunters opening fire on them. 2 participants quickly go down, and while Saul concentrates on driving, the others begin shooting back, making various hunter cars explode. The organizers also make old buildings explode to create extra obstacles until there are only 4 people left, and Saul accidentally goes off course. When more hunters come after him, he uses special driving tricks and drives right through a building to get rid of them before returning to the right road. Unfortunately, he ends up crashing into another driver and his car gets flipped over. Refusing to give up, Saul leaves his car with his package, but Saul prefers to rescue his partner, and together they make it to the finish line in second place. However, only number 3 passes to the finals. Saul is disqualified because his package got shot. Sometime later, Suk receives news of number 3 being out of the competition because her arm received a serious injury. The knights recommend Saul for the replacement, and Suk accepts because he can be used as propaganda. While Saul celebrates with his friends, Zhang brings Suk only the most basic data about the residents, explaining that sharing personal details would be a violation of human rights. Unfortunately, Suk pulls some strings to get authorization to look at those files, and Zhang is disgusted to learn he wants to choose only the genetically good people to be relocated. In the evening, Zhang and her team follow a guy that they hear has a connection to the kidnappers. After a chase through town, the guy tries to fight Zhang hand to hand, but soon he's surrounded by the team. However, when they're about to arrest him, the brain bomb activates and the guy dies. Some days later, Saul is sent to a special facility, and he isn't allowed to leave his room without his mentor, who turns out to be one of the knights from 5/8's team. The third round will be a boxing match, which will be telecasted on TV. In the evening, 5/8 and his team attack a group of trucks to stop the initial testing of the new district, blowing all the vehicles up. Suk gets furious when he hears the news and remembers a conversation he had with Ryu, during which they argued about who deserves to be saved again. Then he goes to check on the pods with the experiments, killing a person just because he can. While Saul spends time with his mentor analyzing his opponent's fights, 5/8 learns that Suk is sending big screens to the refugee district so they can watch the match, which never happened before and is very suspicious. The day of the third round finally comes and thousands of refugees gather around the screens to watch the match and get some free gifts. Grandpa doesn't trust it and tells the boys to watch it with him at home. For the fight, Saul is taken to the core district, where the air is pure and nobody needs a mask. Suk has come to watch the match, and while his father doesn't show up, the president does. 5/8 still has to work, but while he's on the road, a few black cars block the way. 5/8 immediately comes out and fights them all, easily knocking them out in minutes. Then he inspects one of the man's neck with his knife and finds the chip that has been killing all the suspects. After tying up the guy in his truck, 5/8 answers the messages on the guy's phone so the boss won't know he was captured. The third round finally begins, and it consists of 5-minute rounds until only one man is left standing. During the first round, Saul is brutally overpowered and barely makes it out. His mentor is worried, but Saul explains he only wanted to study his opponent's tactics. This guy isn't stronger than 5/8, so Saul isn't worried. While all the refugees are distracted by the match, Suk's men begin leaving bags with bombs all over the place. In the next round, Saul fights more equally to his opponent, although he still gets badly wounded. 5/8 uses the guy's phone to find out about the bombs and calls his night buddies, asking them to leave their routes and join him to save the day. Meanwhile, Jong receives secret information about the refugee kidnapping plan, but she can't act yet because Suk is nearby. Now that he knows his opponent's patterns, Saul easily beats the other guy up and knocks him out, winning the tournament in just the third round. However, the wound on his head reveals his middle bones, which is noticed by Suk and the cameras. At that moment, all the bombs explode and the knights can only stare at the remaining massacre because they haven't made it in time. Later in the evening, Jong and her team check on the bodies and she remembers Suk's weird behavior during the match. Meanwhile, 5/8 and his buddies are beating the prisoner up for information, but the guy won't talk. After the fight, Saul sees his wound in the mirror and finally learns he's a mutant too. Then he's taken to do the registration. After the doctors take a bag of blood, they tattoo a QR on his hand and officially declare him the new 5/7. The blood is secretly sent to Suk, who is excited about how powerful Saul is and what may mean for his experiments. Sometime later, Jong meets with 5/8 and takes a look at the prisoner, explaining all the people working on this mission have the amygdala removed to cut off their emotions. 5/8 gives Jong the phone so she can decrypt the files, but she can't arrest Suk until she has more evidence. Now Saul is no longer a refugee and gets his own apartment. Jong visits him and explains she doesn't care he's a mutant, but lots of people know now, so he should be careful. Meanwhile, Suk is going through another blood transplant and it's revealed that the kidnappings were part of a plan to cure himself. He kidnapped minors' children for their exceptional blood, but so far none of them worked out. Today, Suk's assistant O informs him that they're testing Saul's blood on another patient with symptoms like Suk's, who turn out to be the people in the pods. This is why Suk is obsessed with good genes. He hates his own weakness. The next morning, Saul leaves on his first mission as a knight. While he's crossing the refugee district, he stops the truck to visit his friends and even gives them a ride. Then Saul begins handling the deliveries and keeps forgetting things, but fortunately people like him a lot after the match and are very helpful in guiding him through it. After a day of hard work, Saul meets with 5/8, who shows him the prisoner and the secret meeting place. 5 to 8 tells him everything he knows and the fact Suk is behind it, so Saul accepts to join the special team of knights that are fighting against the system. Meanwhile, Suk pretends that he has accepted the relocation of the refugees and informs Jong he's starting a vaccination drive for them. Later, Jong meets with 5 to 8 and explains they found the planned files on the phone, but nothing that incriminates Suk or any clues about their next move. She also tells him about the vaccination drive, which is already setting up tents in the refugee district, but 5 to 8 is suspicious of Suk magically giving up. Sometime later, Suk's rescue team arrives to retrieve the prisoner. The knights immediately open fire and try to stop them, but the prisoner manages to escape anyway and uses an emergency phone to call for a meeting. A few hours later, he's found by Oh, who says he never sent a rescue team for him. Realizing this has all been a trap from the knights, Oh kills the prisoner and tries to leave, only to be blocked by 5 to 8 and Jong. Oh being here as proof he's involved and Jong can arrest him for it, and if it becomes public, Suk will activate the explosive in his head. Then 5 to 8 holds Oh on the edge of the window until he accepts to cooperate. The next day, Suk and Oh watch a doctor test Saul's blood on another patient, and the man is instantly healed. Meanwhile, the knights use the information Oh gave them to follow some special company trucks, and they're shocked to discover the nghiem group has been deliberately polluting the air to keep the people dependent on them for oxygen, because the pollution caused by the comet cleaned up years ago. Jong gets a message from Oh telling them Suk will be leaving off-site soon, so 5 to 8 decides it's the perfect moment to strike. The following day, Suk comes to supervise the vaccination drive. 5 to 8 hides in a building with the intention of killing Suk from afar, however Oh betrays them and sends a man to stop him. Another knight shoots the enemy before he can hurt 5 to 8, but the shot is heard everywhere and panic takes over the area. The knights rush to open fire and manage to kill a few guards, but unfortunately there's enough of them to evacuate Suk safely and the car windows are bulletproof. On his way out, Suk notices the attackers that have been getting in the way of his plans are the knights. At the nghiem group building, the knights sneak in and put bombs on the contamination system, stopping the trucks. Jong brings all the evidence to Ryu, who promises to do something about it. Jong brings the news to the knights later, but 5 to 8 isn't happy about having to lay low for now. Later, Suk sends his men to raid the knights' hideout, but it's too late. The knights have escaped and gotten rid of their GPS. Suk orders his men to find them and kill them all except for Saul. Meanwhile, people in the refugee district begin feeling very sick. Back to Ryu, he talks to the president and tells her the whole truth, reaching a new agreement. The government will now be in charge of the oxygen system. By the time Suk arrives too, the president informs him the defense minister will take care of him for his crimes. Furious, Suk goes to confront his father, but Ryu explains the company was made to protect people, not to damage them. At that moment, the defense minister arrives and tries to arrest Suk, but he reacts by shooting the guards before handing the gun to his father. Ryu doesn't mind having to kill his own son after everything he did, but before he can pull the trigger, the defense minister shoots him first. It turns out the minister is one of Ryu's many contacts and is on his side, so he has a coup plan to kill the president next. A few hours later, Suk publicly announces he'll continue his father's work and promises to arrest anyone that dares to rebel. He proceeds to post all the pictures of the knights' faces, announcing that deliveries will be halted until they are arrested. Since they're government soldiers, Jong and her team are called by the Defense Department to be part of the coup, but Jong refuses to go. Meanwhile, 5 to 8 wants revenge, and Grandpa reveals he used to work for the nghiem group, so he has the blueprints of the core district that he shares with 5 to 8. While the streets fill with soldiers looking for the knights, more and more refugees get sick and they begin to die in big numbers. Grandpa comes to check on the situation and quickly puts 2 and 2 together. Suk poisoned the vaccines to get rid of the refugees, that way he could accept the relocation without bringing the refugees. Grandpa rushes back to his house to ring a bell to raise the alarm and gives the message to the first knight that shows up, who quickly texts all the others. Soon all the knights come out of hiding and run to the drive tents, where Saul sees his friends are about to get vaccinated. Saul shoots a gun to make all the refugees run away in fear, and the soldiers get ready to retaliate, but one of Saul's friends jumps in and receives the bullets for him. Saul runs to his friend's side to cry for his death, and the soldiers take the chance to knock him out and take him away. Sometime later, Suk receives news that Saul was captured, but the knights destroyed all the tents. Furious, he asks the minister to wipe them all out. Jong hears about Saul's arrest and goes to see the knights, offering her knowledge of the core district to help them attack it. Back to Saul, he's taken to see Suk, and when he tries to resist, the guards hold him down and sedate him in order to start a dangerous procedure to heal Suk's illness through a heavy blood transfusion. In the evening, Jong brings all the knights into the core district by making them dress as her soldiers. The team uses bombs to destroy the force field that protects the place and lands at the entrance of the nghiem building, immediately killing all the guards. More cars keep coming though, starting a gunfight that makes it hard to advance. Eventually one of the knights manages to find the fuse box and cuts the power in the building, allowing them to get inside and kill O and his men. At that moment the emergency power system kicks in, so Suk cancels his treatment to take care of this. The knights continue to make their way inside and find the experiment pods, where they shoot more guards, and 5 to 8 gets his eyes on Suk, who tries to run away with Saul. In the meantime, Jong and her soldiers storm through the government building and make it to a room with the president and the defense minister, who thinks the soldiers are under his orders. However, Jong arrests him for treason instead. Moments later, Jong is outside the nghiem building and announces that the minister is arrested, so Suk and his men should surrender. Suk refuses to give up and goes to the room with the air core to make it overload. An explosion alert is played all over the city and people begin running away in panic, but at that moment, 5 to 8 enters the air core room and opens fire. He successfully kills all the guards, but Suk protects himself by threatening to kill Saul. While Suk offers his villain monologue, a very weak Saul manages to move his chair out of the way, and 5 to 8 uses the distraction to finally kill Suk. Afterward, the soldiers and the knights rescue the people from the experiment pods and takes them away in their vehicles as the locals continue to run away in fear. As everybody makes it to the exits, the building finally explodes, taking down the entire core district with it. Some days later, the president announces District A is finished and everyone will be allowed to relocate there. She also announces the status system has been removed so everyone can live equally without discrimination. 3 months later, 5 to 8 goes to visit Saul, who is recovering and is sick of being locked in the apartment. 5 to 8 finally allows him to leave with him in the truck, and the two of them enjoy how much nicer the air is on the road now.